Hello, everyone. I'm Betty Lutzinger, and today I'm sharing my experience of establishing an online translation magazine at Bryn Mawr College. I'll start by explaining a bit about my motivation and inspiration for this project. As Director of Multilingual Writing, I spend much of my time helping students wrestle their prose into acceptable academic writing that will conform to the expectations of their professors. Education research shows, and my own experience confirms, that students produce better writing when they're comfortable in the classroom, confident in their understanding of the content, and feel that they have something unique to contribute to the conversation. So it's important to me that that group of students is on an equal footing with others in the class discussion, and that their written work receives attention for its ideas more than for its errors in English usage. After reading Mireille Genzel's magnificent memoir translation as Transhumance, I decided to teach a first-year writing seminar on the topic of translation. In that course, one of the assignments was to translate a short work and to write an essay about what you learned from doing the translation. This assignment resulted in some astonishingly interesting papers. Perhaps because the students were able to choose what language they felt most comfortable writing in and about. This assignment exposed intellectual and linguistic abilities that I never would have discovered through other kinds of writing assignments. I received translations to or from Korean, Latin, Greek, Vietnamese, American Sign Language, Spanish, Chinese, Guarani, Korean, Gaelic, and Japanese. Some of these pieces I felt were deserving of a wider audience. That same semester, I attended a conference at Amherst College where I learned of Confluences, a beautiful online magazine featuring articles on multilingualism at that school. And I recommend that publication to you. Just Google Confluences in Amherst and you'll quickly find it. These experiences led me to apply for a LITS Digital Seed Grant to build a translation magazine at Bryn Mawr. This would be a good time to mention that I had no idea how to go about this. My digital literacy was and still is nearly non-existent, and it's only the dedicated assistance of Alicia Peaker, digital scholarship specialist, and sophomore Millicent Oma that made this project possible. The next 3 slides explain the purpose of the magazine, sort of our manifesto. In the context of accelerating language extinction and in knowledge of the reality that most academic journals are in English, I wanted to counter the hegemony of English and elevate the positions of other languages on our campus. One way that we did this was to lead with the original language in our table of contents rather than privileging English. And when I refer to including everyone in the conversation, part of that is creating a connection between the students' families and friends in home countries who are not speakers or readers of English, giving them access to the academic life of the student and life at Bryn Mawr. At the heart of translation and its value both to improve our thinking and to communicate an idea to a new audience are 3 things: the effort to convey the meaning of the original text, the opportunity to add cultural and personal relevance, and the responsibility, of course, to avoid misrepresenting the author's intentions. Within the community, I hope to create a celebratory space for the work of students, faculty, staff, and alumni. We've published work by 2 faculty members, and 2 alums have contacted us who are both professional translators, and one of whom is a professor of translation studies in the UK, and have offered to mentor students interested in careers in translation and to submit their own works for the publication. The idea that translation is not a product, but an ongoing process of struggle to engage conflict and create dialogue, both within and between the translator and the reader, is central to this project. We've maintained the practice that I followed in my course assignment of including a translator note, an essay in which the translator explains the thinking underlying their choices and discusses parts of the translation about which they're particularly pleased or dissatisfied. We invite comments that might lead the translator to revise their piece, and that's a great advantage of the online format, the possibility of continuous revision. Here I've included some of the readings from my course that might be of interest, especially those by Appia, Roy, and Mizumura, who all address contemporary philosophical and political issues in translation. So now let's take a brief tour of the magazine, and I'll show you one example that I think really represents the spirit of, in other words, Bryn Mawr translation. Here on the articles page, the first article is an ancient Chinese poem known as Deer Park by Wang Wei. It was translated directly from the Chinese into Vietnamese by one student, Mia Tran, who, by the way, also did the lovely painting that accompanies it. And then was given a new English translation by Sonia Freya, and who also translated then from her English translation to Irish Gaelic. The second item is On the Boat Night, translated by Sherry Liu. This is another ancient Chinese poem from the Tang Dynasty. And this was the winner of the Richmond Latimer Prize for Poetic Translation that's awarded at Bryn Mawr every spring. I found that although we award this prize every year, the poem is never seen by anyone other than the judges. And so the magazine gave us an opportunity to publish those prize winners. The next article is an essay by Professor Agnes Payson-Zeiss, who did a project with her students, and she describes it here, in which they translated from French to English works by students in the Democratic Republic of Congo. We're going to skip over Raquel's piece for right now because I want to come back to it and talk about it in more detail. Talk of Trees is by Professor Alice Lesnick. It's a very difficult poem in English, which Mia took on and translated into Vietnamese. One of the things that I've done with the magazine is wanting to, again, value the skills of the translator, is to pay students who translate other people's works. Biography of a Poet is by Trishna Rao, who is an American student, native speaker of English. Her family are Telugu speakers, and so her grandmother consulted with her on this translation. Trishna would like to be able to share her grandfather's poetry with a wider audience. He was a Telugu poet and scholar, and she fears, and the family fears, that his works will be forgotten. And so translating them to English and publishing them is one way to preserve them. And Trishna is looking forward to being able to do that as her Telugu skills grow. Woman Warrior was a class assignment for Olivia Singh in her comparative literature class, in which she discusses Maxine Hong Kingston's book from the perspective of a contemporary Chinese person. Coming back to Raquel's piece, The Truth Incarcerated, by a contemporary poet in Spanish, Nicaraguan poet in Spanish. Raquel also did the artwork that goes with her piece. And the poem itself discusses the plight of incarcerated young women who are political prisoners in Nicaragua. We'll notice a couple of things here. One is that she's maintained the Spanish question mark. She actually met, and let's just take a look at the poem. I'll give you a moment to read it. This particular piece was written for my class. You might notice, besides the question mark, some other things that you might find odd or think, oh, perhaps as a native speaker of Spanish, Raquel's English is not perfect, but it actually is. And if you look at a word like constrictment, that might be confusing to you, and she explains that in her essay. We'll take a look at that. You'll notice that the translator's notes are in English and in Spanish. These are not automatically translated. The translator has actually gone to the trouble of writing in both languages. And you find that she actually knows the poet and wrote to the poet, met her when she was a small child and admired her, and wrote to her when she got this assignment and asked her if she could translate one of her poems. So the poet sent this poem to her. And she talks about how this is different from her previous attempts to translate things. And about how she had to establish a process for doing this. And then talks about some of the linguistic problems. The fact that Spanish has gendered pronouns in English, where English does not. Excuse me, gendered articles. Gendered articles where English does not. And here she explains how she came to that word constrictment. An attempt to honor a choice that telescoping word that the poet had created. She talks here about the choices of verbs and their exact meanings and personal meanings to her. And how this particular word has a very heavy meaning in talking about death of a person, as well as the sun going down and the death of the sun. And here she talks about living in the question mark sort of as an act of resistance against the hegemony of English. She did communicate with the poet as she did the translation. So I think this well expresses the my purposes in giving the assignment and the purposes of the magazine to create better analytic thinking and writing, and to slightly democratize translation while using it as a tool to for deeper analytic thinking and writing, and to internationalize the college campus. Now I'd like to let Millicent Oma have the last words, as she is the person who can answer any of your tech questions about the project.
The Inala Words Translation website is built on WordPress. WordPress is an open source content management system. The project implementation took about 10 months, running from May 2019 to mid-April 2020. On the back end, users can upload, edit, and publish content submitted by content creators. Additionally, the administrators can create other user profiles. Among the key features of the website are the language switcher, the articles page, and the user profiles. To implement the language switcher, we leveraged WordPress readily available plugins that enable translation of only specified content. A plugin was also used to standardize the user profiles to display the name, the image, and the bio of the users only when necessary. The articles page, being the most fundamental page on the website, hosts snippets of each content with available translation using custom content blocks from the backend in WordPress. Similarly, users are assigned roles that give them certain permissions on the backend. The main roles are administrator, author, and translator. As mentioned before, only administrators can create other user profiles. Authors are the original content creators, whereas the translators can be both original creators, though often they are translating other people's works. Authors and translators can edit their own content, but these edits are reviewed by the administrator before they are published. As we developed the website, we experienced some challenges. Among these was enabling automatic translation of the website to reflect the user's browser language while retaining the custom translation of individual articles. To resolve this, we restricted Google's auto-translate feature on specified content by writing additional code to our program. Similarly, we had difficulties displaying translation of authors' biographies. Custom code was written to edit the functionality of the language switcher, thereby solving this problem. Additional restrictions were made on the language switcher to hide flags, as these could potentially lead to confusion between a language and a country.